Back now with our Carolina Weather Group panel, and we're going to be taking some of your questions that are coming in right now. We answered one question earlier from Holly looking to leave the Charleston area and wanting to know where to evacuate. We'll remind folks that they can go to places like the Atlanta Speedway or the Charlotte Motor Speedway. If you have a camper, those campgrounds are open. Lots of questions coming in now. Really loving this. Deborah here is asking a question that I'm going to toss over to Frank. Any concern for going to Columbia and flying out early Saturday?
Coming to Columbia and then flying out early Saturday. Well, if you come up to Columbia tomorrow, be prepared for some crosswinds. It's going to be windy, not high winds tomorrow, but some crosswinds to deal with from strong northeast wind. That's part of the reason you're getting some flooding concerns already tomorrow along the low country coast there. But it'll be dry, so it should be able to make it. The rain and wind from Ian comes through on Friday and then lifts north at night, and probably some lingering showers and still probably breezy at least, but I think you'd be able to fly out Saturday morning.
Jared, this question's for you, my friend. Anything else that we should add for the Charleston area to be concerned about outside of high winds and flooding?
Well, one, we have a tornado threat on Friday. I was actually looking at that a little bit listening to Chris and looking at some of the parameters there, and there certainly is the potential for a few tornadoes to come ashore with the strongest rain bands. And so that's something that we're certainly going to need to watch. There's some interesting things in the discussion where some of this lingering dry air that we've had from this high pressure that's been here may infiltrate the storm a little bit and could cause some breaks in the clouds and could ramp up that instability as well. So that's going to be something that we're going to be watching. Water is certainly the main concern. Winds are going to be the biggest concern at the coast. We could see some, stronger gusts well inland as well, especially in those rain bands. I would say that again, freshwater flooding too, the heavy rain, I know that the tides are going to get a lot of attention because, they're going to be so high, but I mean, we're still looking at, 4 to 6 inches of rain in a lot of spots. And we've not exactly been terribly dry here in the last month. We've gotten a break, thank goodness. But if you're in Charleston, you remember August, or more like Saugust, and then the beginning of September, where it just seemed like it was Forrest Gump rain every day, to put it one way. And so, and we got very saturated with that, and we've had a couple dry weeks since then. But again, it may not take much to cause issues. So, and the rain on top of the tides is certainly something that I would be very concerned about as well. James, you're muted.
I pulled a Scotty Powell. There we go. I'm going to go to this next comment here from Chuck, watching on YouTube tonight, talking about Marion, South Carolina, anticipating a lot of rain, praying for lower winds. Hope everyone stays safe. Chuck's talking about South Carolina, but I'm going to do a bit of a pivot, Scotty. Made me think of Marion, North Carolina, talking about the landslide threat. What in your backyard there in the foothills of North Carolina should we be watching for in terms of the threat of landslides?
That's a great question, James. And I want to go back to, we had a very dry June. And then in the months of July and August, we had around 22 inches of rain. September has been dry over the last few weeks. So we're kind of in that dry time, but I'm still concerned about the flooding issues. Because the ground's still a little bit wet. You can kind of still tell there's a little bit of moisture in there. So, with the flood threat, I think that is highly one of the top category to watch here in the foothills. Just looking at some of the data coming in, if you live anywhere along the escarpment of the Blue Ridge, and that's like up into Buncombe County, McDowell County, where Marion's at, Burke County, Caldwell County, up into Wilkes County, up into Allegheny County, kind of where the Blue Ridge Mountains kind of meet with the peaks. That's where we're going to see a lot of lift or graphic lift. So those winds that are coming in kind of get squeezed up against those mountains, and it kind of brings all the available moisture out. And so we could see some higher rainfall totals there. This could definitely, those areas could definitely see anywhere between 6 to 8 inches of rain. In fact, I saw the latest output from the National Weather Service in Greenville-Spartanburg, and they actually highlighted that area being 6 to 8 inches of rain. And then if you get into the Hickory area down towards Statesville, Charlotte, you could see anywhere between 2 to 4 inches of rain, maybe a little bit more than that. So that is definitely the main concern. So with the landslide threat, we have seen some drier conditions. So if we see a lot of heavy rain that is just over one certain area, I think that we could see some of those loosened soils really kind of give way and cause some landslides. And we are notorious for that. If you remember back to the Fred storm last year, we saw a lot of that close to the Asheville area and then up into the Blue Ridge Mountains. So again, landslide threat is a concern. So if you are traveling Friday night, where we're expecting a lot of heavy rain and it being nighttime, if you are traveling, probably best idea to stay put inside, because you don't want to be out on a mountainous road and the side of the mountain just decide to give way. So Friday night is really that concern where we see the heavy rain, the gusty winds, and the landslide threat at its highest. So I've been telling my folks here, hey, if you don't have to do anything Friday night, first part of Saturday, it's a great night to maybe put some soup on and a good movie and or read a book or something like that, and just kind of hunker down until Saturday afternoon when we get that dry slot in. The heaviest of the rain should start to push out of the area. Still see some rain, but not that heavy rain, and you could go about your activity, especially on Sunday forward. So it's kind of that Friday night is really the heightened Friday night into the first half of Saturday. It's really that heightened alert. And then once we get into Saturday afternoon into Sunday, things should start to generally slowly move out of the area. So the landslide threat is real, and so is the flood threat. So that's something we'll have to watch over the next few days.
All right, appreciate that question. Here's a Charlotte question that we can toss around to the group from Julie watching on Facebook. My husband and I are flying back to Charlotte on Sunday afternoon. Do you think there would be any turbulence or cancellation of the flight? I'll take a stab at this one. I think that by Sunday, things will be looking much better than on Friday and Saturday, especially since that time frame seems to be shifting a little bit earlier on Friday for the height of things through the overnight into Saturday. I think there could definitely still be 15-mile-per-hour winds, could be gusts, could be some delays. It's hard to predict what the airlines might do in terms of their staffing or their aircraft. Hopefully by Sunday, they're getting themselves back on course, but they obviously have a lot of flights to try to make up in lots of parts of the country. So I think it's a non-zero chance that there could be some cancellations or delays, even if the weather conditions would have allowed a flight, if they're trying to make up other things in their infrastructure. So good question on that. I'm going to try here to get in Frank Strait, who I think connection is back with us. Frank, this question here is going to be for you. It was intended for Brad, but Brad has hopped off to go prepare for his 11 o'clock news. But Brad was talking about the National Hurricane Center nailing the landfall week out, forecasting getting better. However, as Dave is asking here, he seems to think the strength of forecast, the intensity of the forecast, still is lagging behind the location information that's contained in those forecasts. Frank, what are your thoughts on that? I think you're muted, Frank.
There we go. Now I pulled a Scotty Powell. Jared, now it's your turn next. Anyway, yes, you're exactly right. Your perception is correct that the Hurricane Center intensity forecasts are not quite as good as the location and track forecast, and they'll be the first to admit that too. They realize that, and it's something they've put a lot of effort into recently. Now, I will say that over the last couple or 3 years, I think that their intensity forecast has gotten a lot better. They certainly have gotten better with forecasting rapid intensification compared to a few years ago. And that may just be because they've had a lot of practice, because the last couple of years have been really busy. We've had a lot of rapid intensification situations, but I think the modeling of that has gotten better too. So I think we're getting there with the intensity forecasts, but we're not quite there yet.
Good perspective. I appreciate that, Frank. We have one more question tonight before we wrap things up on this special live edition of the Carolina Weather Group. It comes in from Megan, and she asks, will the storm have time or the right conditions to rebuild over the ocean before making landfall in South Carolina? This question is going to go to Jared. And of course, Jared, she's referencing that the cone of uncertainty, the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, has Ian reemerging off the east coast of Florida likely anticipated to be tropical storm strength, but depending on how much time it spends over those Atlantic Ocean waters before making a Georgia or South Carolina landfall, could it re-strengthen, in your opinion, Jared?
Can't rule it out. Won't rule it out. Again, it's not as long as it doesn't get over the Gulf Stream. I think we're reasonably okay. We're going to be running into some atmospheric trouble with it too. There's going to be some shear working on it. There's going to be some dry air intruding into the trying to intrude its way into the storm. That's what's happening tonight. I mean, we've been broadcasting here. We've watched Ian start to entrain dry air, and that's good. That's what we want to happen with these sorts of things. But you get it over the water, it could at least maintain strength. Could it get a little bit more? I mean, there's the Hurricane Center discussion was specifically called out the potential for a trough to help actually vent it out a little bit, ventilate it a little bit, and maybe help it get back up there. So again, that's a scenario that the Hurricane Center is monitoring closely, and that's why for South Santee down to down into Georgia, including Charleston Metro, down into Beaufort and Hilton Head. That's why we have a hurricane watch. It's not out of the realm of possibility that this could do that. Ian has not, as most tropical systems are. We've got the track part really down well, but as we were just talking about, the intensity part, that can still be a little bit tricky, and so that's why we want folks to be ready for a hurricane, even though it looks like there is a tropical storm there. So certainly something to watch. I'll definitely be watching that with great interest over the next 24 hours.
Couple orders of business before we get out of here. As Jared just mentioned, the forecast from the National Hurricane Center does have that tropical storm warning all along the coast, with a tropical storm watch extending inland to Columbia and to Charlotte, and that hurricane watch along the coast for that possibility of what exactly we were just talking about there, where maybe we do get some hurricane force winds or conditions as Ian reapproaches shore on Friday for that possible landfall. I do want to let folks know, if you are listening to this audio podcast, if you are watching it on YouTube later, or you're watching it carouseling, looping on our Carolina Weather Net at a later time other than this live edition right now, Wednesday night at 10:14 p.m., you are looking at the screen at conditions, forecast, and warnings as they stood Wednesday at 8 p.m. from the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service. Our Carolina Weather Net is the place that you can just park it to watch live weather coverage throughout the week and the weekend. And at the bottom of the screen, there is always the latest information from the National Weather Service. So as bulletins, as warnings and watches get added or removed, they will scroll at the bottom of the screen. And then on the left-hand side of the Carolina Weather Net is where you can always see real-time conditions, whether we're tracking the storm or we're looking at sky cams in your neighborhood.